Welcome you to this evening's Candidates Night. My name is Dickey, and I currently serve as the league spokesperson, so I get this job. We are proud to sponsor this event each year, and actually, we found out that this year is our 50th annual Candidates Night, so quite I'd like to thank both the candidates who are here tonight and all other candidates who are running. We appreciate the time and dedication it takes to run for office and serve the town. In addition to appearing here tonight, candidates also had a chance to address voters by answering the questions found in this year's Voters Guide. The Voters Guide will be published in an upcoming issue of the Westford Eagle, and it's also available online at our website, lwv.westford.org. We encourage you to read those responses, particularly for candidates who either aren't here or are running uncontested races. This event is being taped for future rebroadcasting, and it will be available online on YouTube and on WestfordCAT's website, and we can that also from our website. I just wanted to tell you a little bit about the League, if you didn't know. The League of Women Voters encourages informed and active participation in government, works to increase understanding of major public policy issues, and influences public policy through education and advocacy. The League is a nonpartisan political organization of women and men and does not support or oppose any political party or candidate. We always welcome new members, and there are membership forms on the table in the lobby. They're bright yellow, can't miss them. I would like to thank the Westford Water Department for the water bottles being used by the candidates this year for the 6th year in a row. Those are yours to take. You might, for those of you who are brought before, you might already have them. If anyone in the audience would like to ask a question, there will be League members circulating with index cards. Lindsay, hold up the index cards. So just raise your hand. A runner will come over and we have pens and index cards. Write your question down. Please address the question to all candidates, not to one particular one. We will combine them and edit them for time, especially if we already had another question similar to that. So you might not hear your exact question, but we'll try to get to as many as we can. And now I would like to introduce our moderator for the evening. Heather Mcneil is a member of the Andover North Andover League of Women Voters, and we are delighted to have her back again this year to direct the discussion tonight. So I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for having me. This is a beautiful new renovated building that you have here. I am your moderator, Heather Mcneil. I am in the Andover North Andover League. I live in North Andover. Welcome to tonight's Candidates Forum. Election day for the candidates running this evening, this year, will be on Tuesday, May 7th. The polls will be open from 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. For more information, as Laura said, you can see the Voters Guide, which I believe will be in tomorrow's edition of the Westford Eagle, and can be found on the League's website, lwv.westford.org. The event tonight is a forum. It is not a debate, as candidates will be addressing the audience and not one another by answering questions that were submitted by League members, by community members prior to tonight's event, and also from those here in the live audience this evening. We will have 3 panels of candidates tonight, so candidates, please remain seated until the end of each panel and direct your remarks to the audience watching here and from home as well. In terms of statements and answers, candidates, you will each have 2 minutes to present your opening statements and 1 minute for the closing statements, and you will have 1 minute to answer each question. There will be no rebuttals following answers to questions. And please keep an eye on the timekeepers who are seated here right in the front row, as they will show you how much time you have left and when to stop. When you see the end sign, please finish your response. If you continue speaking well after the end sign is held up, I will say thank you and try to move on to the next candidate. Our goal is really to cover as many topics as possible and to get to answer as many questions as we can. If you are here in the audience, as we go through the forum, again, as Laura said, you could submit audience questions on the cards, and I just will also remind you that each question should pertain to all of the candidates for that particular board. So during our first panel this evening, you will be hearing from the unopposed incumbent candidates for the Board of Health and the Planning Board. If you have questions for either of these boards at this time, it's a good time to pass those questions in. Stephanie D. Granger And Susan Hanley will be running for 2 3-year seats on the Board of Health. And Michael Infante will be running for 1 5-year term on the Planning Board. So first, we will hear from the candidates for the Board of Health, and we will begin with opening statements, which are 2 minutes, from Ms. Granger.
Thank you. Good evening. I'd like to start by thanking the League of Women Voters for putting on this night and providing us with an opportunity to speak to all of you. I've lived in Westford now for almost 20 years in September. My 3 children have grown up here in town. My youngest is now a sophomore at WA. Through the years, I've volunteered in various ways in the town, in particular in the schools and soccer in my church. 3 years ago, I decided that it was a point when I was able to and would like to share my passion and my background in public health with the town by serving on the Board of Health. I was thankful to be given that opportunity by residents, and I have enjoyed serving on the board these past 3 years and look forward to serving for another 3. My interest in public health was born out of my time living in Haiti. That experience led me to desire to pursue a future in public health. I worked for the State Department of Maternal and Child Health and then got a master's degree in health policy and management from Harvard School of Public Health. Now, as a member of the board, I enjoy working with the other board members to fulfill our mission to achieve the highest level of wellness for all Westford residents and employees by reducing the incidence of illness and death. To many, this might not seem exciting, but to me, it is what I love. As a board, we work with the health department to assess community needs, adopt and enforce health regulations, and implement improved community strategies to provide health programs and services. New information about our health and environment is constant, and as a board, we have been working hard to be aware of and engaged in understanding these concerns and addressing them through programs and updated regulations. For example, since I've been on the board, we've updated Westford's Title V regulations, tobacco regulations, body art, food regulations, and worked on earth filling regulations. I think it's important to be approachable and want Westford residents to know that they can reach out to me with their concerns. When concerns are brought to me, I do my best to address them and answer them and bring them to the board for representation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Hanley.
I also want to thank the League of Women Voters for this opportunity tonight to speak to all of you. I've lived in Westford for the past 24 years, and for the past 10 years, I've been on the Board of Health. It's been a privilege to serve on the board, and I'm looking forward to serving for 3 more years. As Stephanie said, the mission of the Westford Health Department Board of Health is to achieve the highest level of wellness for all Westford residents and employees by reducing the incidence of illness and death. Health and wellness include physical as well as mental health. Mental health is something I am passionate about, and I'm grateful that the health department has sponsored and promoted a parent support group that I have co-run with Diane Walsh in Westford. We have met monthly for many years and have educated parents about various mental health concerns and given them the opportunity to talk to other parents. Last June, I was one of the speakers for a special event called Saving Our Teens about mental health concerns in our youth, hosted by the Westford Health Department and the Upper Merrimack Valley Medical Reserve Corps. I've also done work around the state for NAMI and locally for the Westford Parent Connection. And this past year, I was appointed a member of the Town and School Safety Task Force. A little bit about me personally: I'm married, the mother of 4 children, grown children, and 2 grandchildren. I've worked as a registered nurse for the past 33 years, the last 19 as a middle school nurse here in Westford. The health department works closely with the school nurses and supports all of us through flu clinics and always being available for help and support when there's an outbreak of an illness. Besides my involvement on the Board of Health, I've also been involved in youth sports for many years in leadership roles and coaching, and I'm also a member of the Medical Reserve Corps. I love living in Westford, and I'm grateful to be able to give back through volunteering and as a member of the Board of Health. We are blessed in this town to have a health department continually bringing forth initiatives that improve the health and safety of our community and everyone who lives here. I did it.
Okay, we'll now begin with the question portion of our panel, and you'll each have 1 minute. We'll start with you, Ms. Hanley. What do you think are the greatest public health-related issues facing Westford at this time?
Well, again, I'm big into the whole mental health. I'm excited about this town and school safety task force, which is looking at the safety of our town and our school, and it's combining the physical safety of the buildings, and as well as the mental health needs of the town. I think there's a lot of environmental needs that are important, and I think our town has done a great job in a lot of the programs that they're running. I think like the environmental, the healthy lakes and ponds collaboration, and a lot of the community, our town is doing some great things. Yeah, that's.
Okay. Yeah, Ms. Granger?
I agree with what Sue has said. I also say that I think, to me, some of the big concerns are, as things change in this town, making sure that we maintain a healthy water supply and work towards making sure that our air remains clean and healthy for the town. We still are dealing with new and emerging diseases that come through ticks and mosquitoes that we need to stay on top of. In the world around us in the States these days, we have a lot of problems, again, with emerging outbreaks from vaccine preventable diseases, which as a town we need to make sure that we are on top of. And I think there are other new emerging issues. For example, we just recently addressed e-cigarettes in some regulations, and those will probably continue to be emerging issues that we need to address.
Okay, thank you very much. We'll start with you, Ms. Granger. Since you mentioned the measles outbreak, this is a question from the audience. Are you concerned about the possibility of a measles outbreak in Westford, given the recent national outbreaks? And how do you see the Board of Health addressing and minimizing the impacts of such an event?
I think that it is a potential concern. My background when I worked for the state was on the vaccine, I was a vaccine specialist, so this is something I am particularly concerned about. I think that as a board, we probably should be working with the schools to look at what percentage of our students are fully vaccinated and what percent we're having that are choosing not to be vaccinated, and be very aware of that. I did notice that on the board's webpage, it does list places where there have been potential exposure to measles. And hopefully we can also do some more education so that people understand the importance of vaccines and of what the concerns are when the disease is contracted.
Ms. Hanley?
So as Stephanie said, if you go to the website, it's pretty impressive, and there actually was one of the pages talked about the Measles Advisory because of what we've been hearing across the country, and I thought that was great that we're being very up to date. It was from the beginning of April, and as Stephanie said, it talked about the places that there was an exposure. As a school nurse, we work really hard in the whole immunization process. We have to make sure that kids are up to date with immunizations, and we have lists of who is and who isn't immunized. If there is ever an outbreak, any of those children who are not immunized in the school system would have to be excluded from school for a period of time. Measles is very dangerous for, pregnant women. And so I think that Westford is already being proactive because we don't have anything going on here in town right now, but they're already talking about it. And again, as school nurses, it's something that we have to report to the state who's up to date. And fortunately, most of our students are. We have very few that are not up to date with immunizations.
Thank you very much. What more should be done to help address mental health issues for residents? And this will be for you, Ms.
I think there has to be more education. I think mental health, I think there's just so much about mental health, and there's a lot of misconceptions, there's a lot of stigma. I've been very open about it because I experienced it in my own family, and I think that until you actually do experience it, you have no idea what it does and what it looks like. I'm proud of the initiatives that we've done. I'm proud of the fact that the health department again, has a whole section on mental health on the website, and that they support all the efforts that we do. But I think education is paramount, and I really wish we need to do more education for the community. We need to do more education for students, for staff. Unfortunately, when we run events, not a lot of people come, and I keep trying to figure out ways that we can encourage people to get educated, because I think until you live it, you don't realize what you don't know. Wow, I'm sorry.
Okay. Ms. Granger, sorry about that.
I'll start by saying that I'm really glad that we have Sue on the board, because she has a great deal of knowledge on this topic and it's very helpful. I think education, as she said, is really one of the keys, making sure that both people who are in the process of dealing with mental health problems, as well as those who perhaps have friends and family members dealing with mental health issues, we need to educate and provide resources and groups for them, which I think there are quite a few, and I'm glad that we are doing that, and hope that we can continue to provide those services and get more people engaged in the process so that we provide the support that's needed as people struggle with.
The next question will be for you, Ms. Granger, first. Are there any new initiatives beyond maybe some of the ones you've already talked about that you think the Board of Health should undertake?
In addition to what we've talked about,
Maybe there are none.
well, we have been actually looking at, as a board, body art, and recently passed some regulation changes to address microblading. So there's constantly new concerns related to health that come up because technology and issues are constantly changing and evolving. So that's one of the ones we've been looking at. I'm trying to think, a couple others we're talking right now about straws and plastics and what effect those have in the environment, and trying to look at what, as a board, we might do to address that. So yeah, there are constantly new things that are coming before us.
Okay, Ms. Hanley.
Well, we're always grateful when people bring things to us as well, and that helped us with the plastic bag initiative, and getting rid of the single-use plastic bags, and the styrofoam, and so again, we're grateful that people are bringing these issues forward to us, and then we work on policies and to put everything into place. And as Stephanie said, we're talking about the straws, which that's so tricky, but we're also talking about to-go containers and plastic knives, and it's amazing how big an issue it is in the environment, but it's also, at the same time, you have to be fair to the businesses as well. So it's that fine line about trying to be fair to everybody. The whole vaping, e-cigarette issue, I think we're going to see more and more of regulations around that, which I'm so grateful for, because it is exploding out there. And especially as a nurse, that's a huge health concern of mine. Where kids in the middle school are already using vaping products, and of course marijuana, where there has to be a little bit more discussion around that.
Thank you very much. I have one more question, and then we'll switch to talk to Mr. Vaughn and Infante, and then we'll do all of your closing statements together at the very end. So my last question is, after every Board of Selectmen's meeting, an updated version of the meeting's agenda is posted on the town's website that notes what actions were taken at the meeting. This gives the public a timely and accessible recap of the meetings. Do you think the Board of Health should do the same? And if so, how soon could it be implemented? And if not, why not?
Are you starting with me this?
Yes, sorry, Ms. Hanley.
Yeah. We do already post our meeting minutes, so I'm a little confused by your question. Because we already do post them. If you go on the website, you'll see all of our agendas and our meeting minutes.
It was listed as, so they do have an updated version of the meeting's agenda with specific notes about actions taken at the meeting.
Okay, I'm confused by that question because quite honestly, if you go to the website, in the meeting minutes, it talks about actions that have been taken. So I'm honestly a little confused by the question.
Okay, so maybe I could rephrase it possibly as, do you think there are any other different ways that you could engage the public in maybe a user-friendly way?
Well, I think we have. Again, it's been a huge update with the website, and it's impressive. I don't think people realize all that the health department does, and it is a very user-friendly website, so.
you have anything to add, or?
I think that perhaps we don't have as many changes and, what was the amendments? To
Actions taken at the meeting.
Yeah, I'm not sure that we perhaps have as many as the selectmen in general, but our minutes, I believe, are posted. You can find them on the website, and I would love people to come to our meetings. I think that would be a great way to get them engaged, and we talk about some really fascinating things. So I'd invite people to come to our meetings.
Well, thank you very much. So we're going to, I believe, switch to talk to candidate Michael Bonenfant, who is running unopposed for a seat on the planning board. So, Mr. Bonenfant, you have 2 minutes for your opening statement, and then I'll ask you some questions.
Thank you. And also thank you to the league for inviting us and for folks coming out tonight. I'm a 1988 graduate of Westford Academy. I've been here my whole life. I grew up on Flag Road. My folks are still there. I now live in Nab with my wife, and I have 4 boys, also, and Matilda the Bulldog. I'm hoping to fill a seat that will be vacated by Mike Green, who is stepping down. Mike has been on the board for quite a few years. I first met Mike years ago when I first met Andrea on the Master Plan Implementation Committee. I'm looking to fill a seat, but I could never fill Mike's shoes. Mike has dedicated a lot of time to the town, and if you see Mike, you should thank him if you haven't already. I'm a practicing attorney. I have an office on Route 40. I also help out my father, who has a Title V business in town. I do and have had experience practicing before planning boards, not really in Westford. I haven't been before the planning board in probably 10 or 12 years, but Littleton, Chelmsford, Billerica. With the 4 boys in town, I'm asked all the time is, you meet new people, getting in new circles with your kids, and they say, well, you grew up here, you've been here your whole life. How do you feel about the changes that Westford's gone through? Well, I'm not a person who likes change very much, but I know change is inevitable. And I think for the most part, Westford has done a pretty good job, right? So there's going to be growth, and Master Plan has put a lot of growth emphasis on Route 40 and 110 and kept the center the way it could be and it should be, and the neighborhoods less congested. But I think there's work to be done. And I'm looking forward to first observing the way things are going and what's going before the board, but then also in the future, working with folks to learn how that they envision Westford should be and how maybe we could make some changes to the bylaws to make this town even better than it is now. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So you'll have 1 minute to answer some questions. What do you see as the most serious land use problems facing the town as it continues to grow?
So I think the answer to that, in my mind, is I don't know. I think that there are 2 prongs to the planning board. The first is to ensure that the bylaws and the zoning regulations are being enforced. And I've got a lot of experience in reading and working with the bylaws and the zoning regulations. But I think the issues need to come from the town as a whole, how all of the folks see how changes should be made. And I think that after I've spent some time on the board, if I'm elected, I will be able to work with folks to see what needs to be changed and how to go about making those changes.
Even though Westford has reached the state-required 10% goal for affordable housing, do you think the planning board should try to encourage the construction of additional affordable housing in town? And if so, how could the board do that? And if not, why not?
Well, I think it all depends on the project. I think that there are some projects, if made in the right space, in the right areas, definitely there should continue to be affordable housing. I think it's a benefit to the town, it's a benefit to the community, it's better for the people who need the housing. So just because we've met that level, I don't think that we should automatically stop. Having said that, I don't like it as an end around to our bylaws for builders just to decide that they want to build so many units in a certain space because they can do so with the affordable housing. So the answer to that question, I think, is yes, we should continue to do affordable housing, but do it in the right way.
Okay. The next question is, how would you plan to manage commercial or leasing space on Route 110 to retain the look and feel of Westford?
Well, again, I think that comes back to the growth question. Westford does need to grow. It's going to grow. I still feel very strongly that if somebody has owned a parcel of land, it's owned correctly, that it's not the position of the town or board to tell them what they can and cannot do with their land, so long as they're following the bylaws and the regulations. So I think that things can be done. You know, master plan at one point had suggested that the telephone and electrical utilities be placed underground. I mean, that'd be beautiful. Imagine not having all those poles and wires, but it's not necessarily feasible at this point. So I think there are ways that buildings and builders can be encouraged to keep the feel of the small town. But again, I don't know that we can necessarily stop, or we should stop the growth and development.
Okay. Somewhat related to that, do you think the town should limit the number of high-density housing units?
Well, I think that, again, it depends on the project. Being old school, will think of, you know, back in the day that the orchards were orchards, and then they came in and built the houses. And again, who are we as a town to tell somebody what they can and can't do on the land that they pay the taxes on, so long as they're following the regulations? Now, I think that they've been done, like Rome Drive and Anderson's Orchards, they've built nice developments in there. So I think that if it's done correctly, I think that high density can be a benefit in saving, you know, open space, which can be a benefit, but I think it's all planned in project by project basis.
Okay. This will be the last question. Are there ways that the planning board could improve communication with residents and encourage participation with your board?
Well, from what I've seen, there's really not a lot of attendance to the planning board meetings unless it's affecting somebody's backyard. I mean, I hear Board of Health saying, well, you don't come to a meeting. So I think that we should try to get the younger folks involved. And I know myself with 4 kids, it's very busy. You know, you've got sports, you've got kids at school, you've got scouts. But I think that we should be encouraging people to come to the meetings, including the younger families in town, so they can learn the process and maybe step up when their time comes. And the question is how to get them to do it. I don't know the answer to that.
Okay. All right, so we will now end with closing statements. You will each have 1 minute for your statements. We'll begin with Ms. Hanley, then Ms. Granger, and then Mr. Bonenfant.
Guess I have to talk fast. So first of all, thank you for allowing us to go first. Admittedly, this evening can be somewhat intimidating. I would think after 10 years, I wouldn't be as nervous as I am. Running unopposed with Stephanie guarantees that we will both be sworn in this coming May, unless I something terrible in the meantime. I'm grateful to be able to work with Stephanie, Zach Cataldo, Joanne Belanger, and Michelle Crawford again on the board, as well as all the health department members that work in the health department. They're an incredible group of people. I am proud of policies that have been enacted or updated since I've been on the Board of Health, including changing the age of tobacco purchase to 21 from 18 before other towns did so, and banning the sale of tobacco products, the use of getting rid of the single-use plastic bags. I go everywhere with my little, I have one right here. I go everywhere with it. Going forward, I hope to continue to promote mental health initiatives and educate children, families, and townwide staff about the complexity of mental health disorders and the need to identify earlier rather than later in order to ensure adequate care and treatment. And I'm particularly excited about being on this town and school safety task force. I think it's a great idea for the town boards to be working together.
Thank you. Ms. Granger.
So thank you again for this opportunity to speak tonight. Our health is very important, and I'm excited and proud to serve on the Westford Board of Health. During these past 3 years serving on the board, I've learned a lot about septic systems, well water, and many other things that I was not trained in my public health training. I've enjoyed serving with the other board members, Sue Hanley, Joanne Belanger, Zach Cataldo, Michelle Crawford, as well as working with the health department employees. I'm very impressed with these people and their commitment to working to keep Westford healthy. I assure you that I will advocate and do everything in our power to protect our air and water quality, to be on top of concerns about noise pollution, tick and mosquito-borne illnesses, and many other important issues, as well as listening to the concerns of the residents of the town. I now have a better understanding of the health-related needs of our town, and I look forward to advocating on your behalf for another 3 years for a healthy future here in Westford. And I'd like to thank all of those who are watching and would appreciate your support and your vote in the upcoming election.
Thank you very much. Mr. Bonenfant.
Thank you. Again, thank you everybody for coming and watching at home. I'm looking forward to getting on the board and first getting my feet wet and learning how things are going to progress in Westford. But I'm really excited to hopefully work with the folks in town and craft some new plans and new ideas on how we should move forward. I think that, again, my time on the Master Plan and Implementation Committee, we took with the visions of the town were back then and tried to make sure that they were being implemented, and that was maybe 10, 12 years ago. I think that, again, we are doing a pretty good job, but I think things can get better. And if folks aren't happy with the way things are going, you know, we need to make those changes. So I'm asking for your vote, and I'm asking you to reach out to me, and let's see what we can do to make this town better. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you to these candidates running for the Board of Health and Planning Board. Audience, please remain seated while the second panel of candidates who are running for school committee comes forward. It's a good time to pass in any questions you may have for the school committee candidates. And let's give them a round of applause.
So did you get coverage?
Oh, my husband's yeah, they're
Mr. Golder.
it's a school night, so it's better to just use Mellon for them.
Where's Mr. Golder?
Is your little one at home?
Yeah. I'm really fortunate.
Okay, during our second panel, you will be hearing from the candidates for the school committee. They will each give 2-minute opening statements in alphabetical order, or maybe a little bit of a different order. Then we will have 1 minute to answer each, you will have 1 minute to answer each question. Candidates, please remember to address the audience and check in with the timekeepers in the front row so that we can cover a variety of topics. This year's candidates include Daniel A. Goldner, Sean P. Kelly, and Alicia D. Mellon, who has held 2 one-year appointments on the school committee. These candidates are running for 2 3-year terms on the Westford School Committee. And I will begin opening statements with you, Mr. Kelly, so you can get settled.
Great.
So you have 2 minutes.
2 minutes.
You have 2 minutes.
All right, folks. My name is Sean Kelly, and I am asking for your vote for school committee. Folks, let me tell you about who I am. I'm a simple man. I'm really 3 things. I'm family, advocate, and community. Folks, my family means the world to me. And when my wife and I moved to Westford, the #1 reason why we moved here was the school system. My wife is from Westford. I am not. My wife went through the school system here. I did not. But I quickly fell in love with the town. And I knew moving here was probably the best decision I ever made. Next to, of course, asking my wife to marry me, which is hands down the best decision I've ever made. But I was raised by 2 public educators. My wife and I, Brianna, we currently have a son who's about to enter into the school system. And I want to make sure that the school system is the best place possible for him and other students in this. I'm an advocate insofar that I am a trial attorney in Lowell. I take my job very seriously. It's why I became a lawyer, because I wanted to be a voice for people who didn't have a voice. I tell my clients this. I say, look, you tell me where we go, I'll drive the ship. I will take that same collaborative mentality to the school committee. I want to work with you folks. I'm also, another hat that I wear that I take very seriously is that of being a community member. I ran my own business for several years. I currently work for a small community-based firm, again in Lowell, and I know how to balance a budget. I know how to make tough financial decisions. And Westford is faced with a lot of financial obstacles in the next coming years. And folks, even if I don't earn your vote tonight, I do hope that you can go home and say, hey, that's Sean, he's a decent guy. Thank you.
Ms. Mellon, you can take a few extra seconds too if you'd like.
No, that's totally fine. My name is Alicia Curtin Mellon, and I am running for school committee. First, I'd like to be the millionth person tonight to thank the League of Women Voters for organizing this event. They are an invaluable political source in our town, and I'm so very grateful we have them. So a little bit about me. I'm a mom of 2 kids in the Westford Public Schools. I have a 12-year-old and an almost 9-year-old. And in the last 9 years, I've been a volunteer in the Westford schools. I've started with the PTOs in multiple buildings. I volunteered in the classrooms, on the School Advisory Council at NAB, and on the Special Education Parent Advisory Council. Now that's a mouthful, so you'll hear me refer to that as the CPAC tonight. It's a lot easier to say. So, I've served on the Westford School Committee for the last 2 years in a seat that was vacated by a member who moved to the Board of Selectmen. In that capacity, I also sit on the Policy Subcommittee and the Diversity and Inclusion team. I have made it my main focus as a committee member to be as well informed and prepared as possible. I've dedicated myself to researching best practices and Massachusetts general laws, collaborating with the administrations, and listening to the voices of not only the parents, but the students as well. Serving through multiple budget seasons and on various subcommittees has given me insight into how our district functions at the ground level on a day-to-day basis. And it's helped me establish relationships across Westford. Going forward, I will continue to make informed choices and seek the input of all stakeholders, and I very much look forward to answering your questions this evening.
Thank you. Mr. Goldner.
Hi, my name is Dan Goldner. I'm running for school committee. I've lived in Westford for just about 11 years. I have 2 kids. One's about to be 9 and a 7-year-old. I am a high school English teacher. From the time I was about 11 or 12, I wanted to be a teacher. My first motivation was to help others. A few years later, I decided I wanted to be an English teacher, high school English teacher, because I thought, what could be better than reading and talking about books? Teaching English offers me a unique opportunity. I can share that passion for reading with others and hope to spread that passion. But of course, teaching is more than just being an expert in my content, and really my job is not to teach students, rather it's to help them learn. But learning isn't easy. A classroom has to be the right environment in order for learning to happen. A child who has not slept well or has not eaten enough will struggle to learn. A student who's stressed about a math test next period won't be as focused in my class. My job then is not just teaching, not just helping them to learn, but to see each of them as their whole self, not just an English student, but the person sitting there. It is a tremendous responsibility that I cherish and try to honor every day. Just as our students are whole people, so too are teachers. We bring some of the same stressors and worries into the classroom as our students. But I never want to let my students down. Teachers never want to let their students down. When we do, we also let down their parents and the community. I'm running for school committee because I believe it's the job of a community to support its schools and educators so that teachers can best support the students so that students can achieve to their best potential. I believe my experiences as an educator gives me the knowledge to help the community carry out its role in educating our children. I understand that many different elements go into being a member of the school committee. There are budget considerations, staffing, logistical issues, and questions in addition to a myriad of other topics. However, I believe I bring a unique experience and perspective.
Thank you. Sure.
Challenges they see are more. I think I just asked that.
Okay. All right, well, we will now begin with some questions, and Mr. Kelly will answer the first question first. One of the main responsibilities of the school committee is to hire the superintendent. If there is a need to hire a new superintendent during your tenure, what are the top 3 qualifications you would look for in a candidate?
Bill, and first of all, I have to say, we're extremely fortunate as a district. We have a wonderful superintendent, Bill Olson, and we've been very fortunate to have him for as long as we have, which is really not the norm among superintendents. The biggest thing, and in my discussions with Bill, and I think one of the reasons he's been so successful as a superintendent, is that he's always put the needs of the children first. He's never put his political career, because whether you want to admit it or not, a superintendent is a political position, or anyone else's needs before the needs of the children. And I think that's the number one priority that we would have to find in a new superintendent. And also being open to dealing with a very vocal, but more or less smaller district, which is what I think that Westford is, very passionate neighbors in a good way.
Thank you. Ms. Mellon?
I think, quite frankly, there are a wide number of things we look for in a superintendent. However, the top 3 for me would be collaboration, continuing education, and bravery. We've seen in the last year, as we've gone through our budget cycle, that in order to arrive at a point where everyone can agree, we've had to work very closely with our FinCom and our Board of Selectmen. And I think we need a superintendent who is not just working building to building, but working with the town itself as well. I also think that continuing education is absolutely vital. We need a superintendent who's not content to say, this is how things have always been done. Which brings me to bravery. I think we need a superintendent who is brave enough to take the chances our teachers want to take, and brave enough to accept that sometimes we're going to fail. Sometimes things are not going to happen the way we want them to happen. But without taking those chances, there is no growth. And I think we need a superintendent who's willing to steer that ship for us and be the brave leader that we need them to be.
Thank you, Mr. Goldner.
I think one of the main things that is important is a dedication to social justice, including inclusion, equity, and diversity. We live in a world where students need to be able to see themselves reflected in their curriculum and in the staffing, as well as be open to new windows, and that's really important to me. I think a superintendent that focuses on the whole student, not some standard of success that's entirely economic or job-based, or thinking about elite colleges, but rather thinking about the mental health and what's best for the student. And then the third piece would be advocating on behalf of the teachers as the superintendent works with the community to find the best way to fund the schools.
Thank you very much. Ms. Mellon, you'll answer the next question first. After a Citizens Action Committee presented facts that the Massachusetts kindergarten curriculum would be better administered during a full school day, Westford began to offer full-day kindergarten, but at a cost. Should parents have to pay for full-day kindergarten, and are we discriminating against lower-income families?
Full-day kindergarten has been, I think, one of the best programs that Westford has enacted over the last few years. Now, under Massachusetts general law, if you do not offer full-day kindergarten, that is a seat for every student, you can charge. And there are in Westford parents who would prefer their children to be in a half-day program, and I think that's an important voice to listen to as well. Some parents don't feel their children are ready for full-day K. Personally, if I had my wish, we would have full-day K and there would be no tuition for it. I think giving our kids the opportunity to be in the classroom in an environment where they are not only learning their curriculum, but they're still allowed to be 5-year-olds, and they're playing and they're learning through play, which is honestly the way 5-year-old brains work. I think it is cost prohibitive for many families, and I do have concerns about who we are leaving out of that equation. It does come down to cost, though. So if we could find the revenue source for that, I would absolutely love to have full-day K across the board.
Mr. Goldner?
I more or less agree with that. Any fee-based program is inherently unjust. And shame that sort of that's the way things are. as Alicia said, there's budgetary concerns for that as well, which I understand. I'd also be an advocate for full day K, seeing that the condensed, half day is just jam-packed curriculum, and really students, kids, 6-year-old kids should be spending the time playing, learning how to socialize, learning to enjoy being at school. And so I think the full day K allows for that opportunity more so than the half day.
Mr. Kelly?
I'll say up front, and what may be obvious, is that the only thing that Westford's required to offer right now is half-day kindergarten. Obviously, it's in an ideal world, we would have full day that would be included in your taxes here, but here's the reality of it. Who's going to pay for it? It's a difficult question, and obviously things have changed over the years where half-day is not as feasible for a lot of younger families who maybe, like my own, who have both parents who work full-time. But, the system is what it is, and it appears to be working for the most part right now. There's about 48 students, 48 families who were not able to get their students in via the lottery. But most of those students were accommodated through the extended day program. So I really don't think that it's that big of a problem.
The next question will go to Mr. Goldner first, and it's about redistricting. The school committee is currently studying redistricting. What should the school committee do to educate the community on the process used in redistricting the schools?
That's a great question. One of the interesting things that I found when I moved to Westford was that the breakdown of the elementary schools, K to 2, 3 to 5, and then a middle school and a high school. And I grew up in Wayland. I went to a K through 5 kindergarten. I teach in Acton, Boxborough. It's a K through 6 elementary school. So it's a little odd to me. I don't know everything, so I'd be looking forward to learning more about that process, about what the community wants out of redistricting. I think it's an opportunity to look at how much money is spent on things like busing in different buildings, and seeing what can happen that way.
Mr. Kelly?
I keep thinking about when I started running for this position, I had someone who reached out to me named Karen, and she described how when she grew up in Westford, that's what it was. It was K through 5. That's how it always was. I think she graduated from WA in '98. Sorry, Karen, if you're watching. But same with my wife. My wife was not used to the system that it is right now. That doesn't mean that the current system is inherently wrong. I don't think that that's the case. I think that we have to do what's best for our children. But I also do view this redistricting as an opportunity, and it's really an opportunity for cost-saving measures. So, if we redistrict and we're able to save a few bucks on the buses and how they're running, then perfect. I'm for it, and I think that we should educate the community as to it and get everyone else involved.
Ms. Mellon?
So I mentioned committees in my opening statement, and Bill Olson will tell you that anytime he mentions a committee meeting of some kind, my hand goes up and says, can I go to that? Because we've had several administrative and leadership level committee meetings on redistricting and restructuring. And in the very beginning, I did attend several of them. The simple fact of it is, in Westford, we have a lopsided population. Anyone who has kids that go to NAB or Abbott can tell you that those buildings are far more crowded than any other building. This has been coming down the pike for many years now. And I think it's not just about cost, it's also about quality of education in the rooms, making sure we don't have overcrowded rooms. I know that Bill is very adamant about having a traveling roadshow where he goes out and he speaks to the parents at the buildings. I've also suggested using our Move Up Day and Sister School events that we already have in place to help ease the transitions for our students and our families into their new buildings.
Okay, thank you very much. The next question will go to Mr. Kelly first. I'm going to combine a couple different questions here. Where do you see the Westford Public Schools in 5 years And how do you think the school committee can set the tone?
I'm going to answer that as where I expect to see the school system, and where I expect, and as a tax-paying resident in this town, I expect them to be where they are now, which is darn well near the top. And third in the state, some measures within 10 in the country. You know, I expect the school district to be there, especially with the amount that it costs to live here. I mean, it's certainly, it's the reason why I came to this town, and certainly why I will stay here. So in how we keep ourselves there is by keeping the right people in the mover and shakers positions. So those are our administrators who are willing to put the students first over everything else, and to make the right decisions for the whole student. Yeah, thank you.
Sure. Ms. Mellon?
I think there are some really interesting things coming down from the state level in the next few years. There's the overhaul of the foundation budget. There's some new curriculum guidelines for history and civics. In 5 years, I fully expect Westford to not only be on the cutting edge of those initiatives, but also to continue some of the things we've started in the last few years. Our Challenge Success program, which focuses on not just academic success, but the well-being of the whole child. The collaboration that Superintendent Olson is trying to establish with Neshoba Tech. We have a lot of our students who wish they could get into more tech programs, but Westford Academy does not necessarily offer them, and he's looking into a sort of an exchange program where we can offer Neshoba Tech students some of our more academic programs, and some of our students can go there for some of their more technical programs. And I think the school committee sets the tone by being open and honest and transparent, and listening to everyone who brings these ideas to us. We've done a lot in the last few years to be more open and transparent, and I expect us to keep doing exactly that.
Mr. Goldner?
What I would hope to bring to the school committee is an experience as a teacher in a background, and in that is what works in the classroom when there's students in front of you. I think seeing the student as the whole person as a challenge success advocates for is incredibly important. And it was talked about, you know, with some of the previous people up here too, in terms of mental health awareness, that we push our students too hard academically. What does that look like in the future? So what would I hope this looks like in 5 years is that the town continues to implement challenge success and the policies that they advocate for in a way that works for our district. Seeing again also what it's like inside the classroom is making sure that the town is providing the necessary resources to both attract and maintain high quality educators, as well as the materials that they need in order to create successful learners.
Okay. Thank you very much. Ms. Mellon, the next question will go to you first. This is an audience question. At a recent school committee meeting, a presentation showed dramatic increase in pot use in recent years. There's also another question that mentions vaping as well. So do you have concerns about these, and how might you advocate that the school committee address any of these concerns related to drug use?
I absolutely have concerns. So in the last couple of weeks, we've had presentations from the study from Mass General, which was on marijuana usage and cessation. We also had a presentation on our youth behavior risk survey. And I'm thrilled to hear Sue Hanley talk about the collaborative effort between the Board of Health and the Westford Public Schools. Vaping is outpacing the way districts and police departments can respond to it at an exponential rate. What is happening on the ground and in our buildings and with our kids is so far out of the realm of anything any of us have ever experienced. And I think that we need to continue with our efforts through our surveys and through the MGH program and the collaborative efforts with the Board of Health, because it is becoming so common in Massachusetts, and there's more access than there has ever been, and it's ever evolving. And I think we need to stay on top of that.
Mr. Goldner?
Yeah, vaping's a big issue. I remember a presentation we got from an admin a couple years ago about it, just sort of staggering the ease with which students can do that at the high school level in the classroom without the teacher knowing, because the stuff and it was the first I had sort of heard about it, and it was horrifying. I think there's a question too of the why students are turning to these substances. That's a community concern, it's a state concern, it's a federal concern about, again, previously we talked about environmental health for our students. There are existential crises that we face as a society, and if we're not addressing those, there are reasons why students turn to these, and the youth risk behavior surveys and other surveys point to that as possible reasons for overuse. So we have to educate the students about staying safe, while also as the adults, making sure that they have a world that they can live in.
Mr. Kelly?
Yeah, so I was at that school committee meeting, and I found the whole presentation fascinating by Mass General. And here's really what I took from it, is that the pot that kids are consuming today is vastly different than the stuff that we ever saw when we were in high school. The game has changed. Oils and candy and things that can be consumed within a sweatshirt when you look down. Look, there has to be some type of education initiative, and much of it has to be geared not to the students, but to the parents. Because we don't know, we can't even recognize a lot of this stuff. The candies, things like that. And it's so potent and so beyond what anyone ever talked about when they referenced pot 20 years ago. And I'd also say that this has to be a rehabilitative effort as opposed to a punishment effort. Look, I'm a criminal defense attorney. I do some criminal defense, a lot of criminal defense. Throwing the book at these kids obviously isn't the right choice. Therapy works, folks.
Thank you very much. The next question, I'm going to make it like a 30-second question because I want to make sure we cover a lot of topics. So with a brief answer, Mr. Goldner, you'll go first. Why do you think we have so many students being tutored or attending math enrichment centers like Mathnasium or Russian math? And do you perceive this to be a problem? Very quickly.
Yeah, it's a problem. Accessing to tutoring depends on wealth, and so is sort of disenfranchised or takes away some people's ability to access it. I think students and families turn to tutoring for high-stakes testing. High-stakes testing, I don't think is great, and this sort of idea of like, what does it mean to be successful? That's why I'm glad Challenge Success is here and the town's working with it so that we can redefine that and so that hopefully that pressure won't be there as much.
Thank you. Mr. Kelly?
I'll keep it really brief. I think that it's a problem. I think that we as a society need to step back and kind of change what we view as successful. Is it money? Is it the best scores on the test? Or is it someone who's a wonderful person who regularly attends community meetings like this and gives back to their community and helps a neighbor when they're in need? So I think that as we shift as a society, hopefully, our reliance on things like this, it won't be as prevalent.
Ms. Mellon?
It's definitely a growing problem in the district, and I think there are multiple reasons for it. One of which is we are an extremely high-achieving district, and there's a lot of pressure put on not just the parents, but the students. There's also a phenomenon happening where we have some first-generation parents who have a very specific idea in mind of what success looks like for their children, so they are more inclined to push for higher stakes, honors courses, AP courses, and things like that. I think at the end of the day, core curriculum has always been the best, worst idea on the planet. And I think we need to focus on competency, not the high stakes testing that is causing this panic among families.
Okay, thank you very much. The next question will go to Mr. Kelly first.
How long?
What? Oh, hold on. Let me look at the question. I would say 30 seconds, I think. The Challenge Success Program has been mentioned a couple times. In your opinion, what is your opinion on the Challenge Success Program now at the middle school and at WA? And in your opinion, what should the next steps for the program be?
Oh, geez. I'm obviously a fan of it. I think we've been mentioning it through and through tonight, that this over-reliance on results as opposed to the mental health and whole being that as a student, it's a problem. Challenge Success is addressing that. You know, do I have a specific idea of where I think it should go in the future? I don't. I think that it should obviously continue, and I think it's doing a great job.
Thank you. Ms. Mellon?
I am a huge proponent of the Challenge Success Program. I think there is a considerable need to find a balance for our students. They need to achieve academically, but they also need to be whole people at the same time. And I think Challenge Success is a great program for that. My concern is that this cannot just be a one-off. This cannot be one professional development day. This cannot just be a handful of workshops. This needs to be the district walking the walk, and we need to go all the way down into our elementary schools, and there's some fantastic programs happening there with mindfulness and well-being, all the way up to Westford Academy, and touch every student with it.
Thank you. Mr. Goldner?
Yeah, it's really important to start talking with the kids or creating programs at the elementary level so that by the time they hit middle school and high school, they have the tools and the skills necessary to deal with the high stresses that exist at those buildings. You know, I think moving ahead with it too, you know, I would look forward to continuing the conversation about looking at start times and making sure that we're matching the learning with circadian rhythms of our students.
Okay. Thank you very much. Ms. Mellon, you'll answer the next question first. It'll be a minute, for 1 minute. What do you see as the role of our schools in supporting our children's mental health?
It's essential. It's absolutely essential. For a large part of the day, we have over 5,000 students entrusted to us. And in our town, that's about 20% of our population. And in order to provide adequate mental health support, we need education for our professionals, we need education for our paraprofessionals, we need to be supporting the idea of more social workers in school and access to guidance counselors. I think there is a huge opportunity in the Challenge Success Program and the shift in thinking in the district to become a district that looks at the whole child, that supports the whole family, that is not just there to teach you reading and writing and arithmetic, but creates at the end of the day a citizen, a human being. Our district motto is very often, you can see it on our webpage, it's shaping the future one child at a time. And I think if we don't balance the academics and the emotional well-being, we're failing them.
Thank you. Mr. Goldner?
Yeah, this is a really important topic and very, it's me pretty close to home. Schools need to have the resources necessary to work with students, social workers, counselors, school psychologists. We need to make sure that if we really care about mental health, and I certainly do, I think our community does, that we need to put our money where our mouth is and make sure that the staffing is appropriate at all the buildings. Excuse me.
Thank you. Mr. Kelly?
Yeah, this one hits close to home also. Look, I said I was raised by two public educators. My mother is my hero, and she is a rock star, and she's a school psychologist and has been so for 30 plus years. Yeah, okay. And what she taught me is that it starts on the ground level. It starts with making a connection with with an individual student, with really working with them, and even if it's just having a conversation with them when they're having a bad day, that having that connection, it goes so far in these kids' lives, especially when they have problems at home. So I think that Westford Public Schools are doing that. And I'd like to see more of it.
Okay, thank you. We have 2 more questions. The first one, this next question will go to you, Mr. Goldner, first. Safety of our students is of utmost importance. What do you see as the school's role and the police's role? And how do you feel about the current police presence in our school system? And do you think we need a stronger presence? So school safety, police's role.
School safety is important. We're talking about mental health of students. We have to talk about physical health as well too. We have to keep our students safe. I'm very conflicted about police in school buildings, knowing history of police violence against students of color, making sure that if we have resource officers in buildings, that they've got the necessary training in terms of diversity and their unconscious biases to make sure that they aren't disproportionately targeting students of color for mistakes that they may make, right? Therapy as opposed to throwing a book at them. I think it's really important, though, that said, that the police work with the schools in creating a safe environment for the students there. And it's good that that's been happening and looking at the physical structure of the buildings to make sure that we're keeping our students safe.
Thank you. Mr. Kelly?
School safety is a big concern, obviously, and if we go by what's on the cable news, it's in everyone's mind. I'm for having school resource officers. Obviously, the school resource officers, those people they're special. They're really special. One of my best buddies is a school resource officer in New Hampshire. And what he drove home with me is that, look, with the school resource officer, you got 1 part cop, 2 parts social worker. And that's really what they are. So they're not just there for safety, they're part of the community there. And they work with the teachers and they work with the students. They're not just there to, rough kids up and stuff. It's so far from it. They want to see these kids succeed. So I'm all for school resource officers in every school.
Ms. Mellon?
So I very often say we have this strange situation where we start out in our K-2 buildings and we talk about first responders as community helpers. And very often by the time you get to the high school, suddenly it's a school resource officer. And we are extremely lucky in Westford that we have Detective Jeff Pavao. And he is an excellent resource not only for our students, but for our parents. He's actually speaking to the Special Education Parent Advisory Council in 2 weeks about what school safety looks like for special needs students. I think we have an opportunity here to take what is a pressing need for school safety and turn it into a collaborative problem-solving experience. Our resource officers, our police department, our fire department, our Board of Health, our EMTs, they should all be part of the team that makes sure that we are not only a functioning school district, but a functioning town. And I think in the appropriate ways, such as our 2-pronged approach to physical building safety and student mental health and wellness, we can get to that collaborative problem-solving place.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, our last question this evening will go to you, Mr. Kelly, first, and it's about school budgets. How would you improve the school budget process in terms of establishing priorities and transparency and communication? And maybe if you can, weave in the projected increase in busing cost and how that might factor into the budget.
Okay.
Combining questions,
All right.
trying to cover everybody's thoughts.
In a minute.
Budgets?
Let's go.
Yeah.
All right.
If you go over a little bit on
Yeah, all right.
that slide.
With budget, budgets are like taxes. Do it early or voting. Do it early, do it often. Really, so there's an influx now of potentially 300 to 400 new students that are potentially coming into the district within the next 2 to 3 years. That is concerning and overwhelming. So in terms of the budget, we have to start talking about it now. We can't wait till the fall. We have to start talking about what's going to happen in the following fiscal year now. And by how I would get everyone involved is just by being available to you folks. I think everyone needs to have a voice in the budget process, even if you don't have kids in the district, because you are paying taxes here. And in terms of the school bus question, I think that there's some creative ways that we can deal with the increases there. But certainly the bus costs are going to go up, and it might just fall on the additional fee that parents have to pay out of pocket as opposed to the district paying for it, unfortunately. But I see room for some creative working to get that number to come down.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Mellon?
So budget is fresh in my mind. I was just at a forum last night with Senator Kennedy and Senator Lewis talking about the Promise Act. So the way, for those of you who are not familiar, the way that schools get funding from the state is under the Chapter 70 laws, which have not been updated since they were first adopted in 1993, which is an absolute travesty. I think we've done a lot in the last year with our question and answer periods with our FinCom and our Board of Selectmen and having our public hearing at the library. That was fantastic. I know many of my colleagues and I have discussed putting on a workshop the way Selectwoman Almeida did, excuse me, her Show Me the Money workshop, where she sat with Dan O'Connell and we went over how town budgets work. I would love to see us do that for our school budgets because it is an extremely complicated process. And I also think that goes to your second part of your question, which is transportation. Transportation costs are skyrocketing across the state, and there is a greater movement to adjust transportation costs as we do this Chapter 70 funding reform. But I also think that we need to communicate better to parents that our fee structure has stayed fairly level even with the increases. No one likes increases, but our fee structure has stayed fairly level as our costs have skyrocketed, and I think we need to better communicate that to the parents as well.
Okay, Mr. Goldner?
Starting with the bus component to it, and this has sort of come up before too, I think any fee-based program is inherently unjust and targets people who can't afford it as much. Even if there's a waiver process in place or whatever, the stigma is still there. So I really think districts need to move away from any fee-based service and wrap all that into the budgeting process. I recognize that that means that, if the budget increases, where does that money come from? Well, as Alicia said, the state's looking at changing the way Chapter 70 funding is distributed. The Promise Act is a start. I don't think it's going to end up being incredibly successful. So the burden's going to remain on towns and communities for a little bit until we can change at the state and federal level the way we care about education. Funding education from property taxes is not a good idea. And obviously, I have no control over what's going to happen at the state and federal level in terms of that, but we have to pick up the slack until we can change that.
Okay, thank you very much. So we will now end with closing statements, and Ms. Mellon, you'll go first, and you have 1 minute.
So thank you again to the League and to all of you who submitted questions online and in the room. As many of you who have worked with me know, this is actually my favorite part of the job. I love to be in a room and discussing these things with our constituents, with our parents, with our students. There simply is not enough time in this forum, I wish there were, to get to every question. Luckily, my second favorite part of the job is follow-up. I am constantly speaking with parents and students via email, at our meetings, at our superintendent open houses. So I would like to end with, if you have any further questions for me, if there was something you didn't feel was addressed tonight, you can find me by searching for me on Facebook, Alicia, Westford School Committee, or you can find my webpage, aliciaforwestford.com, and I am happy to answer anything we didn't get to tonight or maybe clarify something that you would like more information on. And I thank you all again, and I hope that you will vote for me on May 7th. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Kelly?
Thank you, and thank you to the League for hosting this tonight. It's really been wonderful, and it's been a privilege to be here. Thank you to you folks for being here, and for the folks watching at home. Here's what I would say. I would say Westford is faced with some tough financial difficulties in the next few years, particularly surrounding the increasing population in this town. So we got to start planning now. And you want the right person in that position. I believe I'm that person. I've been a small business owner. I know how to balance a budget. And I really hope that as we get through this, that we're able to maintain student-to-teacher ratios of 22-to-1 and 25-to-1. I think it's possible without making drastic cuts to programming. So, again, folks, with me, like I said in the beginning of this, I'm simple. I'm three things. I'm a family man, I'm an advocate, and I'm a community member. And I hope that I have your vote on May 7th. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Goldner?
Thank you for this opportunity. Feels a little different being kind of up here as kind of like a student answering questions than as a teacher. It's a little unsettling. So thank you for bearing with me. As an educator, I like to pretend that I know everything in front of my students. Sometimes it's hard to tell them I don't know, but certainly I don't know everything. If elected, I'd be looking forward to learning from current members of the school committee, what it's like, the way it goes. I'm looking forward to learning from the community, what the community cares about, how they want to help make the schools a better place for everyone too. I think that really now is not the time to be complacent with the status quo or to go blindly along with what's always been. I think now is time for voicing a strong commitment to what is right, what is just, and what is fair. And that means putting our schools, our teachers, and our children first. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you to these candidates running for school committee. Audience, please remain seated while the third and final panel of candidates. So I'd like to welcome up our third and final panel of candidates who are running for terms as library trustees and board of selectmen. Come forward. It's a good time if you have any questions that you may have for the boards. Welcome back. We're going to get started with our last panel. We will now hear from the candidates for Westford's library trustees and board of selectmen, all of whom are running unopposed. They will have 2-minute opening statements like our other candidates in alphabetical order. This year's candidates include Glenn Secor, who has previously held a 2-year library trustee's seat and is now running for 1 3-year term as a library trustee. And the incumbent candidates for 2 3-year terms on the Board of Selectmen, Scott Hazelton and Andrea Perenner-Sweet. Right? Perenner. There we go, Perenner, sorry about that. Andrea Perenner-Sweet. So first we will hear from candidate Glenn Secor, who is running unopposed for a term as library trustee, and you have 2 minutes for your opening statement.
Thank you. I want to thank the League for hosting this event and for all of you for turning out and for tuning in. It's been a privilege to be an appointed library trustee since last summer. It would be a privilege to be elected to a 3-year term in May. My wife and I are longtime residents of Westford, and we're actually high school sweethearts at Westford Academy. We're both book and library lovers. The J.V. Fletcher Library is a Westford jewel, and I commend the people of Westford for making it so. But the library is straining to meet the needs of the community within the physical limitations of the current building. We're hoping to undertake an expansion and modernization project in roughly 2021-22. And that would be the first expansion in over 30 years. This will be a major focus for the library staff and the trustees in the coming 3 years, along with the continuing evolution of the library in the age of electronic information. I bring to the board a background in business and law, along with an understanding of town finances from my years on the Finance Committee and a lifelong commitment to libraries as a public resource. I look forward to answering your questions.
Thank you very much. So our first question, you have 1 minute to answer it, is which library services do you think are the most important to the community?
Wow, which are the most important? So you have the materials and the access to the information, which are obviously important. That's what we think about with libraries. But the library runs a lot of programs, and especially programs for our children and young adults. And I think those are extremely important going forward. And that's one of the reasons for the expansion, is to have the space to run proper programs for the kids.
And what do you see are the current areas of improvement in the library?
Areas of needed improvement?
Of needed improvement, yes.
So the library does an awful lot programmatically. It's a community resource. It's a meeting place. All of those things are done just at the highest level by our library. And going forward, it's, again, to go back to the space concerns, we just don't have the space to properly house the materials that we have and to run the programs that we're running. We also host something like 2,000 meetings a year at the library, and that if you've ever tried to book a meeting room at the library, you know that they're at a premium. So that's an area for improvement going forward.
Okay. The third question is, when and if Westford receives the state grant for the library addition, what should the trustees do to ensure that the town's voters approve the town's portion of construction costs in a debt exclusion question on the ballot and at town meeting?
So that was part of my answer to the league's questions. I think the big challenge for trustees going forward over the next 3 years will be that outreach to the community to advocate for that project. The town has a lot of capital needs and a lot of unfilled capital needs, and town finances are tight. So library trustees are going to have to be willing to be out there and to be advocates for this project to let people know why they should support this with their tax dollars.
And are there certain ways that the library trustees could encourage more communication with residents or encourage more participation in that process? Are there specific ways you have to do that?
I don't have specific ways in mind. Our meetings are open. We're always, we always like to have people come to our meetings. People generally don't come to our meetings. Our meetings are not televised. So for the trustees, we really have to make the effort to get out there to different forums, to different events, and I would look forward to doing that.
I have one last question for you. Are there any plans to update the library's website to make it more user-friendly, easier
Yes, there
to
are.
navigate?
I'm glad you asked that. That's a project that's being undertaken now. The library has its own website. It doesn't use the town website, and there's a redesign project that's going on this year with some money from the library budget and some money from the Friends. And I think you're going to see a great library website within the next few months.
Thank you very much. We will now hear from the candidates for the Board of Selectmen, and then we'll do closing statements at the very end. So, Mr. Hazelton, you will go first. You have 2 minutes for an opening statement.
Thank you. I want to thank the League for a chance to speak tonight. I want to thank those listening for the time you're taking to learn about the candidate seeking office. I came to Westford in 1986. My wife, Sue, and I have raised our 3 children here. The last one left the schools 2 years ago. I have great appreciation for our schools, also for the array of other services this town offers our residents. And one of those great things the town offers is this building, which is also one of our accomplishments for the past term. The renovations building, which I think came out really, really nice. Thanks to the Town Building Committee for coming in under budget, making it even more beautiful that way. Over the past 3 years, we've made some major strides in public safety. We have a new fire station that meets the department's needs today and in the future. Again, thanks to the Permanent Town Building Committee for bringing that one in well under budget. Increased call volume has created a need for more police and firefighters. The budget at town meeting we just passed provides an officer and 2 additional firefighters this year. We added 2 last year, both 2 cops and 2 firefighters last year. And the plan calls for 2 further officers and 4 more firefighters as future budgets allow. We've improved and extended sidewalks around town, prioritized snow removal around key sidewalk segments. I co-chair Town School and Safety Task Force with Tom Clay. We've engaged in a security consulting team who has completed an interim report. May 14th, they'll be sharing those results with the Selectmen and School Committee. We have $20,000 appropriated to implement those recommendations. And I say we a lot because rather than I, because as Selectmen, there's 5 of us. We don't always agree, but we shouldn't always agree. But we are a good team that works together and I think accomplishes the best for the town. A lot more remains to be done. Physical environment is not getting any easier. Major capital needs are on the horizon. Stormwater management complicates our budget, but I want to use my experience, my commitment, and my professional training to keep Westford a great place to live and raise a family. So thank you for your consideration.
Thank you. Ms. Perriner-Sweet.
Thank you. So Let me also add my thanks to the League for sponsoring this on its 50th anniversary. My thanks to all of you for coming tonight, and my thanks to anybody who is watching us tonight. So after 9 years on the Board of Selectmen, 13 years on the Planning Board, and numerous committees and task force, why am I doing this again? I'm running again because I am committed to this town, and this town that has been my home for 35 years. It is also a town that I brought my brother and his wife and his family to about 8 years after I moved here. I'm running again because there are ongoing projects that I'm committed to seeing through to fruition, including the library expansion. And I'm running again because I believe that I have the ability and demonstrated track record of bringing people together to solve difficult and what at times can seem to be intractable problems. As I look ahead to the next several years, I see the town facing challenging times. Healthcare costs continue to rise. We have an unfunded stormwater drainage mandate. We are looking at an influx of housing that will impact our schools, public safety, virtually every town department and service, and we must face these challenges mindful of the ongoing fiscal realities and constraints upon the town. To meet these requirements and challenges is going to require leadership, creativity, and an ability to work collaboratively and cooperatively with all town departments, boards, commissions, and committees, all qualities that I bring and the experience that I have. Throughout my service to Westford, I've always had one agenda item, and that is to do the best for Westford. I'm committed to making Westford the best possible place it can be. I am always open to hearing from people. I hope to foster and hope that I always have fostered an environment where people can be heard, viewpoints can be expressed, and where there is an open and a frank exchange of ideas. I've always pledged to listen to all viewpoints, and while I may not always agree with you, I always promise to listen to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, the first question will go to you, Ms. Perriner-Sweet. And it is, what is your vision of the future for the town center, specifically the new center building, site of the former fire station, and 63 Main Street?
So I think one of the best features of our town is our center and the fact that we have been able to preserve it for all of these years. And, you know, I have people who come and visit Westford and they walk into the center of the town and they think they're back in an old New England village from the 1800s. I want to preserve that feeling, and I don't want to lose that feeling. We have been working for almost 2 years now on the town center building and what we're going to be doing with it. We have a committee that has been looking at that. We hope to bring that forward sometime in the fall. But it is my hope that, you know, that building will not detract from the character of the town. 63 Main Street, you know, we have a wonderful opportunity to preserve that home. We've been in it recently. There are terrific and marvelous historical features that need to be preserved. Again, we have a task force that's looking at that, that is going to be reporting back to us, I believe in May or June. I can't remember which, but it will be reporting back to us soon. So we'll wait to see what happens with that.
Thank you. Mr. Hazelton?
So if you've been to a selectmen's meeting or watched one on TV, or a planning board for that matter, you watch the people filing in and filing out after every item of contention, because we can't actually support more than about 30 people in the meeting room. So the idea of the town center building is partly to get space to have a true community discussion at a selectmen's meeting or a planning board meeting or other meetings. Our IT department is sitting in a abandoned fire station in a remote part of town. They need to be with the town center. So looking at some really key needs that need to be met with the new town center building. The key is to make it fit in the town center. I am the liaison for the selectmen to the town building committee, and we are looking at a plan that gives us a building that is, if you will, subservient to the town hall that still fits. 63 Main is a jewel. I'm glad we're able to purchase that and preserve it. The future use will be determined again by this committee and their ideas for the Board of Selectmen, but the key is that we control the destiny of that structure, and we want to maintain the town character with that building roughly as it looks today.
Thank you. And Mr. Hazelton, you'll answer this question first. How do you see the selectmen's role in enforcing APRs?
Okay, so APR, agricultural property restriction. So if you really a reference to Boston Road and the old Drew Gardens farm stand, a lot of contention about this one. You know, there's certainly, I won't go into legal opinions here. You can watch lots of meetings on that. I think what matters now is we have a landowner who is not the town that owns a property. He has proposed, of course, restaurant and failed 3 times with that. So it's up to our job as selectmen now to enforce the APRs that he holds. At our next selectmen's meeting, he is due to come before us and talk about his plans for the property. So far, we've had, I think, reasonably good plans for 2 parcels, not such a complete plan for the 3rd. So we do want to listen to that and see what he says. But, you know, the town bought that land to prevent housing and to prevent development. Town meeting has said no to development, so I think the selectmen's job is to enforce the will of the town and keep that agricultural space.
Okay. Ms. Perner-Sweet.
Thank you. As Scott has said, I think that the town has spoken to us loud and clear 3 times, and they've told us that that property for which we bought in order to preserve the agricultural condition of that property is something that they want to see continue and to happen. This has been an incredibly contentious issue over the past 3 years. As Scott said, we have a landowner who owns that land. At this point, while I am committed to seeing that the APRs are enforced, I also think it behooves us to work with that landowner, or to try and work with that landowner, and to try to stop the constant battles that we've had with him, and try to see if we can come to some reasonable solution among all the parties that allows the landowner to certainly use his property in a way he wants to, but at the same time to recognize that we as a town own the agricultural preservation rights. We should preserve them. That is what we are charged with and tasked to do. And can we find a way between all of the parties and among all of the parties to reach some consensus as to how we move forward with that property?
Thank you. And Ms. Perner-Sweet, the next question will go to you first. What is your position on stormwater management?
It's great. I love it.
These must be all the tough issues in town.
You know, one of the things as I was looking back and sort of writing my things, my statement for the league and for preparing for this tonight is, we've been talking about stormwater management in this town for 6 years now, because when I looked back at the statement that I provided to the League of Women Voters 3 years ago, I talked about stormwater management in that statement. We have an unfunded mandate from the state, but we have to fund stormwater drainage. We have no choice. The problem is, as I said at a Board of Selectmen meeting several weeks ago, there is no good solution to this problem, because there's no way that somebody isn't going to be adversely affected, whether it's a business, whether it's a homeowner, whether it's the town itself. But we have to come up with a solution. So we are working towards that as a board. We have another meeting May 14th to further discuss it and to try and reach some resolution to slowly implement this so it doesn't overwhelm our town budget. But at the end of the day, we're talking about clean water, folks, and we have to do something.
Thank you. Mr. Hazelton, you can take a few extra seconds if you need it.
Thanks. As Andrew said, we don't have a lot of choice here. It's an EPA mandate under the Clean Water Act, and as it is about clean water. A lot of this actually is about monitoring. So it's looking at, as it's stormwater, it rains, or the snow melts, and it goes someplace, and it brings a lot of road residue and so forth with it. The idea is to be able to channel that and look at what's in it and clean out what's in it to the degree possible. That's what the cost comes from, and that cost is certainly in the millions over time. We're working on a budget right now that says what can we fund per year to keep us in compliance with that mandate and not bankrupt the taxpayers. So there's this tension between how much we need to spend. That's being worked on with our town engineer, town manager, selectmen, and how we pay for it in the various options, fees, surcharges, overrides, also on the table to be discussed. If you watch our meetings, the 14th, we'll have more discussion. It's a town retreat on, I think, June 13th. Please come to that. That is meant to be a real gathering of the town to discuss this, and a little more, I think, flexibility with the town engineer, our consultants, and I really want to hear what the townspeople are thinking in terms of preferred ways to handle this, because it's a problem for all of us collectively to deal with, and not a real fun one.
Thank you very much. Our next two questions are both related to town meeting. So Mr. Hazelton, you'll go first. Would you support an amendment to the town meeting bylaws that would modify the motion to dismiss?
No. And the reason I say that is because we don't need it. So the motion to dismiss is debatable. The moderator has the option under Westford's rules to allow debate. You can't just move the question on an article to dismiss unless the moderator allows that. So the solution is not to create more laws around town meeting. It's to basically have, I think, the judgment of the moderator used to say if there's motion to dismiss, we at least allow a proponent and an opponent to discuss before we have any kind of motion to move the question. So I think we can take care of ourselves without more rules.
Ms. Pernismer.
Yeah, I would agree. I think we can take care of ourselves without more rules as well. I think a motion to dismiss is debatable, but I think we are a town that has always encouraged debate and discussion, and town meeting has always been one of the places that happens. I think that for anybody who brings forward an article at town meeting, and this is allowed, they should be able to present their article. There should be the opportunity for any opponent to be able to speak, and then there should be a debate on the floor. If after that somebody wants to move the question to dismiss, then that can be debated, and then town meeting itself can decide whether or not it wants to dismiss the article or whether or not it wants further debate to continue. The one thing I do not want to see and hope that we do not see is that a motion to dismiss should not be used as a weapon to curtail debate and curtail discussion, because it's only through discussion that we make the kinds of reasoned decisions that this town has always made in governing itself.
Thank you very much. The next two questions are going to be 30-second or less, really quick. I'm sure there's a lot more you could explain, but I think they could be answered fairly quickly. And we'll start with you, Ms. Perriner-Sweet. Are you in favor of bringing electronic voting to town meetings?
Absolutely. There you go.
Okay, Mr. Hazelton.
Yeah, I mean, I love the quaint democracy of all sit up and all sit down, but it's just confusing. People have to go to the bathroom in the middle of it. I mean, so it's just electronic voting, you're done, it's clean.
Okay, that was very quick. And the last one, many Massachusetts towns have changed the name of the Board of Selectmen to Select Board. Would you support such a change in Westford?
Do I start or does he?
Oh, sorry, Mr. Hazelton. I apologize.
I mean, I don't mind having the change itself. I'm fine with. I think it should make a lot of sense since we have a board of 3 men and 2 women right now. It's a select board. In fact, I think we all kind of call it the select board. The issue is with doing that, requires change to the town charter. It's quite an involved process. It means going through the state legislature. So mechanically, it's difficult, but as a matter of fairness and policy, I think it makes some sense.
Yes, I would certainly support it. And I would be more than happy to lead the charge to do it procedurally and get it before the legislature and get it and have our state representative and senator present it to the legislature and have it passed by them.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. We will now end with closing statements. You will each have 1 minute, and we'll begin with you, Mr. Sikora.
Okay. Thank you again to the league and to all of you for coming out tonight. Very simply, working with the best library director in the state, Ellen Rainville, the trustees have provided excellent oversight and governance to the library for many years. I pledge to continue that tradition and to be an effective advocate for the library if elected next month. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Ms. Perriner-Sweet.
You know, people often say to me, The Board of Selectmen, it's such a thankless job. Well, it's really not a thankless job. True, it has its moments, but this community is wonderful. We have great schools, we have great open space, we have great town services, we preserve our buildings, Exhibit A, here tonight. We have quality commercial development. In Westford, volunteerism is an ingrained value and a way of life here. People give back to this town in any way they can, whether it's serving as an elected official, volunteering in the school, or at their children's sports teams, or at the senior center. It has been my privilege and my honor to give back to Westford for more than 20 years. And during that time, I have worked hard to make Westford the best town that it can be. I've tried to honor the town's history and heritage, to preserve our open space, and to act fiscally responsibly, and to bring people together to achieve the best solutions for Westford. You, the residents of this town, have placed your trust in me and electing me to serve on the Board of Selectmen, and previous to that, the Planning Board. It has been my honor to serve you, and I ask for your vote again on Tuesday, May 7th. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Hazelton.
Thanks once again to the League of Women Voters for sponsoring this night and the chance to speak to our voters directly. When I began my first term as selectman, I received a message from a former selectman, very simple: take good care of the town. Westford is a special town, unique in many respects and treasured by all of us. A selectman doesn't just set policy for the town, he or she holds it in trust. Taking care of the town is more than dollars, it's more than infrastructure, it's more than services. It's also about preserving the character of the town and improving opportunities for its residents. Last year we purchased the home at 63 Main, as mentioned earlier. While its future use to be determined, we'll preserve the character of Main Street. We need a new town center building, which is architecturally consistent with existing structures. We recently formed a task force to preserve the Old Town Farm, a building of historic significance. Town meeting approved the purchase of much open space the past year, a process we've been working on now for probably a decade. Over the next 3 years, I want to implement measures to make our schools and town buildings safer. I want to continue to make progress with public safety personnel and pedestrian access. I want to see the town farm and the mill at 12 North Main Street back into productive use and preserving their historic nature. I want to see the stormwater management plan implemented with least disruption to the taxpayer. And I want to keep Westford the special place that it is. I've tried to take good care of the town. I thank you, and I ask for your vote on May 7th.
Thank you very much. I'm now going to turn the microphone over to Laura Dickey, but if we could give this panel a round of applause.
I'd like to thank Heather for moderating tonight. Thank you to the candidates for participating, to WestfordCAT for taping it and making it available online later, and to all the league members who worked so hard to put this evening together, 50 years and going. Remember to vote on Tuesday, May 7th. Thank you.